All right, so now we have seen the basics of React Router, and also we saw how to pass data around in URL params and how to read it from that. Let's do one more thing. Let me just put this inside of the users component itself anyway. My machine is running really, really slow because as I am recording these videos, I'm also recording my screen, trying to convert it to videos so that I can upload it to YouTube, and I'm doing it parallelly, and that's why my machine is extremely, extremely slow. So let's say we have this users component. We have these 4 or 5 components. Our app is starting to look something. We have a few pages. Let's say this app also has a section that you can't really go in till you have logged in inside of the app. And we're going to try and implement that. And I'm going to pull in context also in this one. Because we can make things slightly easy with context in this, but context is not really necessary for doing anything inside of React. You can make the whole React application without using context, but sometimes it just makes life easier, and we'll see like one of the case how it does make it easy. But our goal is to have another link here and another component. Let me just make that component quickly, and then I'll talk about what we're going to do. So cons, let's say we have like our secret page. Oh, what the heck happened here? Okay, so let's say there is our secret page and return it's a secret. And our secret page just has a secret message written on it, and we really don't want to show this page to our users without a login, but let's just put it right around here for now. I can go change this, have another route, which will be just the secret page route, and we can go it if we go and visit secret in the URL. And I can just give a link here as well to go to that secret page. And I'll just add another link for that called secret. And this is called a secret page only with login. Let me just put that in the bracket. Only when logged in. So we have the secret page, which when I click, it just shows me right now, like this is a secret, but we really do not want that to be happening. We want only people who have logged in or we know of to see this page. Otherwise, if they click on this link, they should be thrown back to, like, let's say slash or slash home, since slash is exactly same as slash home for our application. Because we wrote it here that if we exactly hit slash, we should redirect to slash home. So somehow we want to have a little bit of an authentication system here, but I am not going to make an authentication system because putting that in would be like half an hour more of work and a lot of things that is completely unrelated to React Router or even context or anything for that matter. Authentication and login is a whole thing on its own, so I'm not going to be making it. And I think anyway, in the coming 1 or 2 weeks, you're going to start making your own authentication system when you do the project week, when you have the project course part of the course. So for now, we can have this really simple authentication system. And our simplest authentication system will have sort of 3 things. We want to keep track of the current user is logged in. So maybe a state to see if user is currently logged in. I always write what I want to make so that I have it written there, and then I can start breaking down the app in small components and small functions, which I can then go through easily. If I just think of everything at once, it becomes difficult. So always try to jot down what you're going to make, read it through, and then try to go on making small parts out of it. So I think there should be one place where there should be one variable which should be telling me that if the user is currently logged in or not. There should be some sort of a login method, and there should be a login function, and this login function should set the user to be logged in. And also, let's say after the login, we want to do some sort of an activity. Let's say after the login, we want to redirect the user to a different page, or maybe show something about after the login. So it should also take like a callback, like what to do after login. What to do after login, right? And as the same functionality as login, there should be a log out and a logout function. And this logout function should set user to be logged out, and also a callback. Once the user has been logged out, maybe we want to show a very different page to them. Maybe we want to show them the login page again, or something, but we do not say that they were on our secret page and then they click logged out. We don't want them to be on that secret page, right? Because they have now logged out. We do not want to show them the data, or currently the user is not authenticated. So that would be security hole in our application. Rather, we would have them redirect to a different page. Maybe if once they logged out, we can redirect them to just the home page. So this is what is in our mind, that we want to have a variable to control the state, a login function that changes that state to be logged in and takes a callback, a logout function that changes that state to be logged out, and also takes a callback on what action to do after that change. So you're going to start implementing that now. Also, just to keep things clean, I usually prefer to keep all these routes in a separate component. So I can just go here, cut them out. We'll make a component here called const router or routes. Or maybe actually better, I call it page route in general. And our page route component will just simply return this page route summary that we have made. And I can just go and render this component maybe right here, or maybe inside of this app. I can go just render this component page route, and now we have the same functionality. What I did was I just separated this part, because usually when you write your routes, there is no function, there is no calculation, there is no getting data from objects, making a fetch request. There's nothing happening. There is all static text, right? You do not change your routes once you have written. Like if I have slash to map to slash home to match about, that's a very fixed definition. I'm not making many changes. So usually I keep this in a whole complete separate file. And it is also easy when you have a lot of files, you have a lot of different code pieces being lying around. You can just go and refer to one file and see all your routes. So it's usually nice to keep this in a separate file or even as a separate component so that you can just have it for a quick, easy reference. So that was a small diversion. Now let's go back to adding the three things that we had already discussed about. So we need a state to check if the user is logged in currently or not, just a variable. And we need to change that variable on login. We need to set it to true if the user is logged in, and also handle a callback, which I already discussed would be an action that is performed after our login happens. Similarly, we want to make another logout function that also manipulates the user login state, sets it to false, and also handles a callback, which means what to do after the logout happens. Since this whole user being logged in or log out is necessary for the whole application, I'm going to try and go stick the login and logout application state right in our main application. So I can go and const is logged in. I should call it is user logged in, but you get my point. And set user logged in. I can initially put a use state of false. We do not have use state. I'm going to just go and import that. Now we can access the use state. So initially the is user logged in is false and set user logged in is true. Set user logged in is the function we can have to manipulate the state. So let's make this function a login function, right? So I'm going to do const login. And this login function is simply going to do is set user state logged in to true. And as I said, it will receive a callback and do something. So I'm going to put a callback here. I'm just calling it CV for callback. And to simulate a login, I can just go and call the callback here, right? Whatever function we were going to do, whatever action we're going to make, think of it like as a promise sort of a thing, right? I'm trying to fake here a promise of a logged in. Why a promise? Because usually when you do log in, log out, you go hit the server and the server logs in or logs you out. But it's always a request, and the request gives you a fetch request will give you a promise. So think of it like that. Like after the promise, you write a then and you do something like, hey, if the user got, we hit the endpoint for doing a login, and if the user logged in, let's show them a different page. And basically, that's what this function will do. When I call login from some page, I can pass something here as a function and say, hey, when the login has happened, do this. And just to simulate the latency of a fetch request, I can do a set timeout here. We have already covered set timeout in the previous class. So I'm going to do set timeout on the callback. And let's say after like 200 milliseconds, do that callback as we have talked about, right? So what will happen simply is when we click on login, our user state is going to be true. And after 0.2 seconds or 200 milliseconds, if we gave any other function for it to execute, we're going to run that. Similarly, I'm going to make one more for log out, pretty much going to be same. If the user was already logged in, we are now doing a log out, so it'll be false. And again, the callback, let's just say that even this request, wow, where did that false come from? Even this request comes up after 200 milliseconds or like 0.2 seconds. Now is the fun thing that I can start putting a button here that can help me do login. So I'm going to just put a button on top. And let's see if our app, if our login and logout currently even actually work. So I'm going to put a button. And I'm going to call it a login button. And on click, it should take a function. Let's say it does a login for us and we have to pass a callback. Currently, I don't have any callback, so I'm going to just do a console.log and call it logged in. And also, let's try to see this state somewhere here. So we have this is user logged in state, right? I'm going to just put a paragraph tag on top. So user is so here, I just simply took this. This was a Boolean. So I simply just said user is logged in or logged out. So initially we get our user is logged out, of course. And if I click on login, our user gets logged in. And after 200 milliseconds, we get on console log this callback function, whatever we wanted to provide here, and it's doing its job. After 200 milliseconds, it says to us logged in. One thing, we should also put a log out button, but we can do it intelligently. If I put a, let's say, if I go and put a log out button here, I could just go and say log out. And in the callback, I'm going to give this log out callback. I'm going to say logged out. I'm going to call this log out. So our user is currently logged in. If I press log out, our user is now logged out and we have this message logged out. But we shouldn't be having both of these buttons, logged in and logged out. It should depend on if the user is logged in or logged out. So I'm gonna just put this variable here. If the user is logged in, then show me the log out button actually, because the user is already logged in. What's the purpose of having a login button? And if the user is logged out, I should be showing a login button here. And this sort of now makes more sense. So currently, let me just zoom in. The user is currently logged out. I press log in. It says the user is now logged in. And now I have the log out button. And now I can just determine if the user is currently logged in or logged out. This does our fake login and log out a little bit. I know there's no password protection. There is nothing. We are doing a very fake simulation of what a login and log out would be. You will be doing proper login and log out in your next project week, but this is completely unconcerned to what we are going to do over with React. Now we have this basic login, logout thing working around. Let's also try to go and see if we can use this sort of variable that if the user is logged in, can we just make this route not happen? Well, one thing could be we can just hide this link, right? The secret page link shouldn't even be there. If the user is logged, oh, wow, it just flew everything away from me. So if the user is logged in, only then show me this link page, right? So now when I log out, that link page is completely gone. If I log in, the link page is there, but if I log out, the link page is completely gone. And now I can go and visit it. But look, I am still visiting the secret page. It says it's a secret. I log out. The link is gone, but I can still access the secret page. I can just directly go, once I know the URL, I can just directly go on that page and still access everything from that page. What we want to do is we don't want the router to be even allowed to go on this page. So let me just, we can keep this variable as it is in here, or we can actually even show the link, because we don't really care about the link. The link is just an easy way to not type the URL, but somebody can just go type the URL. So we want to hide this at the router level itself. And let's see what can we do with this. So I'm going to start making a new component, and I'm going to make a component called a protected route. We have these normal route components, and it'll be the same as this route component, only that it will have some sort of sense of whether a person is being authenticated right now or not. So let's see, we want this protected route to behave exactly as this route component. It should be a drop-in replacement. Let's say if I want to make this route as a protected route, I should be able to just do this. I have to also close the brackets, but it should just be a drop-in replacement. So essentially, it should take all the functionality of a route. So that's what I'm going to do here. I am going to exactly copy-paste this. I'm going to return another route. And inside of this route, I can either render the children. So since we don't have the component, it will be the children here, since these things are passed as a children. So currently our protected route should work. Oh, there is no path. I can also say whatever the props are. Pass rest of the props along here as well. So now our protected route will still behave exactly as this route component. And just to show that, I'm going to put this at the about page for now. I have to change the closing bracket as well. Let's see. If I go on the about page, I am still able to go to the about page. So basically, we just copy pasted. We just exactly said the same thing. Whatever the props are, put the props here and put the children here. It means absolutely nothing at this point. But what else we could do is somehow if we could check here that is the user logged in or not. And that's the fun thing. We want to check that if the user is logged in, then we go to a normal route or else we redirect. And we can just copy the syntax from this because we want to redirect the user to the home route, let's say. So currently I do not know how to access this variable here. So I'm going to just assume that this variable is false. Right? And let's see what happens. Now, if I am at /home, currently our protected route is the about one, right? So if I try to go to the, let's say if I am at the secret, I can still see if I'm at the contacts, I can still see the contacts. If I click on the about, I immediately go back to home. Why? Because this, let me get this zoomed in correctly. Because our about route has a path about, which is the part of the props. It has a child called about, which goes in here. But first we are checking that if the variable is false, then do not do this, rather redirect to home. And that is what is happening. Now inside we had true. The app will reload. Now if I go on contacts, I can see contacts. If I go on about, I can see the about page. So somehow if I can control this variable, which we already know how we are doing it via this is user logged in. So if I can access this variable somewhere around here, is user logged in, then if it would be true, we would be able to pass through our route. If it would be false, we would be redirected to home. And this becomes our sort of protected route. Currently, we do not know how to get this user logged in. So let's see, where is this protected route? And actually, let's move our protected route to the actual page. What we wanted to protect was this secret page, right? Let me just put it here. So somehow I want to pass this as a prop, maybe. If I get this as a prop, is user logged in to this protected route, I should be able to determine this is maybe coming from somewhere. I don't know. I'm just trying to get the props correctly in line. So this protected route needed this prop. So I'm trying to get it from here, but this is still not here because this is a separate component. So I can probably get it from this component maybe. And now this component has access to it. So this component needs it. So I can maybe pass it to this page route component where it's getting. And now I have passed it around 2-3 different places. Now I actually have access to it. So let's see how it is working. If I go to the about page, I can see the about. If I go to the contact page, I can see the contact page. If I go to the secret page, I get redirected to home. I do not see the secret page for even once. I redirected to home. Now let's say if I log in. If I log in, now it says the user is logged in. If I go to the contacts page, I can see the contacts. If I go to about, I can see the about. And if I go to the secret page, now we can see the secret page. Let's say even if I log out right now, as soon as I logged out, the page automatically redirected me to the home page. Now, if I log in, I can go from the home to contact and I can go to the secret page and see it. If I log out, I'll be redirected to /home. And if I try to go to secret page, I'll still be redirected to /home. We can now see our protected route is sort of working, but there is a little bit of a mechanism, right? We wanted to access this is user logged in only in this protected route component. But since we were using this protected route component in the page router, we have to get that as a prop. And since we wanted the page router has that as a prop, we need to pass it from here. And here is our application, which actually has access to the is user logged in. So we had to pass it to one component. This component has to pass it to another of its children component. This component doesn't even require it at all. This is user logged in is only concern of the protected route. But we still had to pass it because there is no other way from this app to get it all the way down here to the protected route. We have to keep passing the prop to all the children till we actually reach the child element that we want to pass the actual data to. And now this problem is solved with context. So let's see what React context gives us. I am already on the React documentation, which is super nice. I can go and search for context. How to use context and what is context? Okay. Oh, this is a legacy context. There was this something old way of doing context, which was horrible, and that's why people were not using context too much. And we're going out for solutions like Redux and everything. Context, if you ever heard about Redux and it confuses you that should I be using it or not, what is application global state? This is an application global state, right? If the user is logged in or not, we put it at the top of the application. This is a global state. We are managing it simply by using state and passing the props all around till the bottom. But we can do it in a better way. You can do it with Redux also in a better way, but let's just see what we can do with simply context. Why you should use context. So here they have given an example, which is also pretty nice. Let's say our main variable right now here is user logged in or not, and that's like concerning to the whole application, right? There might be different parts of the application you want to show differently depending if the user is logged in. Similarly, we could have like a theme. If you have seen on any documentation websites, let's say Material UI, I think has a page that changes the theme. So this is Material UI's documentation, and there is a button on the top that will change it to a morning theme or a dark theme, right? And if I click it, it becomes a dark theme. And if I do the other way, it becomes a light theme. And what it is doing is it's essentially showing the theme data on which colors to show in the top application level. And it just keeps switching over these two themes, how we were doing login and log out. On this button click, they are just changing one of these two themes. And different parts of the application are changing because of it. So if I just click, oh, I accidentally clicked on GitHub and it's going to take ages to go back to GitHub. But now if I go and click on this, you can notice the icons change, the font colors change, everything is changing, and all of them are referring to this theme. But instead of passing it down all along, there's something clever being used, which is a context. And here, if you go at the React documentation, they give you an example how to use context. They are showing that they have put a theme to be either dark or light, and that's coming from the button. How you can provide a global value is making a context and using a provider out of that context. We're going to talk about what a context is. Here is how you create a context. Here they gave initially the value of that context to be light, and then they provide it with the provider, and they can change the value whenever they want. Now this toolbar or any of its children, for example, toolbar has a children called theme button, can directly access this value light or dark, whatever these value has to be, without explicitly being passed to the toolbar. So remember, the toolbar doesn't take any prop, but the theme button can get the theme context. Do they have a better example? Let me just look. They are using a very old API for it. Let me see if they have something called useContext, because they again changed the API. useContext. Sorry. Okay. That was there has been 3 different versions of the context API. The first was very experimental. Nobody was using it. The second was before hooks came, and now we have something with hooks. So this is a far better example, right? They have themes. They have a light theme and a dark theme. We are initially saying, make my context with a light theme as a default. When I'm passing to the toolbar, I'm saying my theme is dark. Notice toolbar is not taking any props. So any of its children are also not having any props from the app, basically. toolbar takes a themed button, and themed button again is not taking any props. Notice that. But since we have injected a context on the top of toolbar, this value can be accessed by any of the children of the toolbar without actually getting the props. So now here they just go use context. They give this context that they wanted to use, the theme context. And from that, they get the theme, and then they are rendering the theme's background and the theme's foreground, howsoever they wanted with that button. This is again not taking any props. The props that the toolbar is also taking, it is not using it anywhere, or neither it's passing to the theme button. But with context, we can directly get the data without passing it to subsequent children. And that's exactly what we were looking out for here, right? We wanted to get this is user logged in directly in the protected routes component, but we didn't want to go through the page route component or pass it along the whole way through the app or through the page route component. We wanted a direct access, either as a prop or as a context, but we want just access to this variable. So let's try to refactor this auth logic as an auth context provider. So let's see how you create context. So they say const theme context is equal to react.create context, and then they start putting up the data they want to put as the context. So let me start by creating a authentication component. So I'm going to call it cont authentication. And this is not just even a component, but we're going to make it into a component. It could just be a hook. I'm going to copy all this logic from here to here. And I am also going to create a new context. So I'm going to call const authentication context is equal to react.create context. And initially, I don't have any value, so I'm going to just put in a null. I don't know what my context is going to be. Now, from this authentication, I can render out the context gives us at least one way to do components, which is the context dot the provider, and then we pass the values that we want to have inside that context. So I'm going to do the same thing to our context, and I'm going to do authentication context dot provider. And whatever the children come in here, I can just render them out. And the children will come from this component. Now, here comes the fun part, that I can give any amount of values to this, right? So I can start providing the values we would need in other components. So we definitely need to know if the user is logged in, and that's going to be my first value that I provide. I also want to give the login function and also the logout function in this context. And I can pass, again, whatever you can pass as a prop. You can pass functions, you can pass variables, you can pass anything as a prop. The same thing, you can just pass them as a context as well. And I forgot to completely return this. So let me just go and put a return statement next to it. Let me start cleaning up things now. We need the access to the variable is user logged in here. So let's start wrapping our authentication. Remember that our provider should be wrapping the whole application. So since it needs to have the application also logged in, I'm gonna just put this where we render our actual application, and I'm gonna wrap it around from there. Again, our authentication can be a complete separate layer without affecting the rest part of our React code. This authentication is coming from, let me just make it as a new file here. and call it authentication.js. And let's remove all this piece of code. I think I cut it a bit wrong. But yeah, let's just remove all this piece of code to authentication. And let me export the context and also the authentication component. Since the theme context needs to wrap the whole application, I just made it into a separate component that I can go, and I have wrapped my whole application with that, and I can just simply go and import it from /authentication. And now our authentication has wrapped it. Now we need to start consuming the context. And for that, we need to have something called useContext. I don't think I imported even React on that page. Let me go and fix the authentication page. Yep, there is no even React. Okay, this page is now fixed. Let's go to our application. We do not have any state now, but we're going to have useContext. And let's see what context we can import. We should also import the context variable. So I'm going to import authentication context, and I hope it's called that. Yes, it's called authentication context. I'm going to import authentication context from my local file /authentication. So how do we get these variables back? Now, since we could have simply passed it as props to our application, but we need to use it all around our application. So I'm going to simply get it from the context. So I'm going to say I will get these three variables if the user is authenticated, if the user is logged in, and if the user has logged out. And I'm going to get these three variables because that's what the three variables I'm providing in the value of the context provider. And let's look here. These will come from the context. So I can say use context. And the used context is which context do we want to use? We want to use the authentication context, right? This has to be LOGOUT, log out. Let's see if things work. What we did is called a refactoring. We just moved a bunch of code around to make our architecture cleaner. Let's see what is happening now. If I try to go to the secret page, I cannot go because I'm going back to home. But let's see if it actually works. If I go to the contacts page, I can still access the contacts. If I go to the about page, I can still access the about. If I try to go to the secret page, I get redirected to home. Let's see if the login works. If I press on login, it still says the user has logged in. Now, if I go to the secret page, I am able to access it. If I press log out, I am able to log out and directly go to the home page. But again, we haven't solved this issue, right? We are still passing it to the page route. So I want to remove it from here because the page route really doesn't, as I said, page route doesn't do any sort of data fetching, any sort of calculations. It's just a very static file. And usually I put this in a complete separate file. It's just a static file of telling which route goes to which component. So it really doesn't need any other data, right? And henceforth, our protected route cannot get it from the page route. So how can a protected route get it? The protected route still wants it. We are providing it as a prop here, but now that we are not getting, how do we get this variable? Well, simply the same way we got that variable in our app. I can just say const is user logged in. I can still access the login and authentication from here, but I really don't want to. I can say use context, and it will take the authentication context. And let me go and refresh this page. Let's see if everything is working back again. If I go on the contacts page, I can still access the contacts page. If I go on the about page, I can still access it. If I try to go to a secret page, now I again get redirected to the home page because I'm not logged in. As soon as I click on logged in, now I can go and access the secret page and I can see what's on that page. But if I click on log out, I'll be kicked out and sent to the home page. So we can still go and access this is user logged in variable from the protected route, even though it is not passed as a prop, because this prop is supposed to come from the page route, and the page route itself doesn't have access to this variable. Even though the protected route is a child of the page route, it does not have access to the is user logged in variable, because this is injected through context. And this context comes from the very top layer of our application. And that's why it's sometimes called that context can be used to maintain global application state. Similarly, what React does, React adds a little more things on top of it, which depending how much do you like Redux, it either makes your life easier or more difficult. Um, but again, we can just use context to maintain global state. We can pass around functions normally as we would do with props. And we can skip from child to parent. We can completely skip the intermediate parents and directly have access to some data or functions in the sibling from a parent top component.